This is my viewfinder.
But again, I mean, there's always different sides to things, right? And to automatically just go to the negative, I think that's more something that each individual person has to, manage within themselves.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I mean, yeah, I don't want to open these conversations so that we agree on these things. You're right. Number one, definitely painting with broad strokes. I think that's not only a part of my personality and one of the reasons why I do this sort of thing, but I guess, yeah, I get caught up there. I think specifically like what you brought up, I wonder what photography could or should be defined as. So what you're talking about is that the process of photography, so like having a camera, hitting a shutter, developing an image, that in itself technologically is pure. It doesn't have an intention or a bias. I'm kind of worried about both the photographer's sort of intent, bias, both, from what they want to portray, but also, I mean, like, you're taller than me. You see different things. You're inspired to take different photos. So there's already a conversation, there's already a narrative involved in building the image. And then, as you brought up, which is a bigger sort of wider thing that I'm too caught up with, is how are other people experiencing and interpreting what that image means to themselves. And that's, yeah, like I'm caught there. It's why I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
But I think can I interject? Yeah, all these things that are worrying you, as far as how photography is being used, how people are interpreting your images. I mean, all of this stuff is. It seems like you're getting really caught up on things that are 100% out of your control. So I mean, there's no. People are going to take your images how they take your images, right? I mean, you can't change that. You can't change how someone comes into something, right? I mean, as much as you can change how tall you are. So I mean, to focus on that, it's going to be very frustrating because you're just going to keep spinning your wheels because you can't do anything.
Well, yes. I mean, maybe to twist that a little bit is I take that position, and certainly my own experiences thinking the way I do, but I keep thinking about whether that influences how photography is perceived in general. I guess, for example, I think I get a lot more attention carrying a camera than I would taking sort of sneaky snapshots on an iPhone right now. That there's a cultural tension with the idea of photography. And I could be wrong, but I feel like we live in a world that's paranoid about a surveillance state that has become distrustful of photography as a principle. So while your sort of, your direct opinion about my thought process is totally valid for my personal work, I'm just seeing that there's a weird tension of people that want to be photographed all the time for their Instagram feed, but if you have your camera out, you get yelled at a lot, and people tuck away. And we live in Canada, so it's like a lot less confrontational than in much more severely population dense areas. Although, again, I brought up Asia because it sounds like in different cultures you had different experiences too, depending on, what the cultural idea is and where they're at as far as, I don't know, what they fear they're losing from it. I would like to believe that, in the 50s, 40s, and 30s, people didn't think they were going to lose anything from getting their photographs taken. It wasn't a personal attack. But there's something right now where photography, I feel like, is becoming attached to a sense of, actually, you brought up in reflection of me, like self-worth and how I appear to others. I don't want to be on someone's Instagram feed. I don't want to be portrayed half eating a sandwich. I don't know, but there's a nervousness that I worry that photography actually has contributed to, frankly.
Yeah, I think it's more of that's more of a symptom, I think, of larger societal paranoia and issues. I mean, obviously we're in a crazy time right now, right? I mean, and you brought up the different cultures. I mean, yeah, within the last year I've shot here. I've shot in different places in Asia. I was in New York in February. And yeah, I mean, there's vast differences between a lot of those places. I mean, I went to, shooting even within like New York. shooting in, Soho is a lot different than shooting in Bed-Stuy, especially being a
White dude.
yeah. There's a big difference in how people take it, right? And that's not, and I don't think that has anything to do with photography. I think that has to do with just society, and it has to do with just cultural sensitivity, which is, again, like these are all more. Photography isn't the issue. The issues are far deeper than photography. I mean, people are also I think partially it's a good thing, right? People being a little bit more questioning when it comes to an image that they see. I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, just like I don't think we should watch Fox News or CNN and take everything that they say verbatim either. Nothing is pure, right? That doesn't exist. But I don't think that's a photography thing. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah, I guess that's my what's motivating me is that I won't say I'm convinced, but I think I disagree, and I don't mean that in a competition way, but I look at photography. I'm beginning to feel like it does contribute and has shaped the culture that we live in of this paradigm. And I think, and this is broad strokes again, so I don't mean to sound like I'm going to be right about this, but I do feel like for example, I can't remember which countries you're talking about, like Thailand or wherever you were, that people were very, very benign, if not encouraging of your practice. I suspect that as this ill social effect of what those photographs can be used for becomes more apparent, that will end. It won't be about politics the way we understand it, like, this bipartisan shit about right, left. I think it's just going to be this fear of misuse and misrepresentation, which is something that I don't understand enough about fine art and the history of art. And so I'm looking for painters and artists and art historians to talk about the use of image in general. But photography in particular, I think, has made things worse because it seems literal, right? I mean, it's the power of Fox News. You put on something in a 30-second soundbite and everybody sees it. It's passive, so you don't have to think about it, and it becomes reality. I mean, photography for me is exactly that, and that's kind of where I'm stuck. I think you're right. I mean, your experiences show that it's not even like New York's a uniform culture, and conversely, if you were a black man or an Asian woman or an openly trans something, your experiences will be vastly different depending on what community you go into, because it'll represent different threats or commonalities with people that you're around, right? So that's why this is never going to be answered, and is completely nuanced to my crazy thinking. But that's my paranoia, I think, and the kind of driving force of this podcast and this conversation is I'm kind of becoming convinced that photography is the problem, or has been.
So let me give you a scenario here. So I'm in New York, let's say. I'll use those same two neighborhoods again, Soho and Bed-Stuy. So I approach a black man in Soho to take his picture. I then approach a black man in Bed-Stuy to take his picture. The reactions that I get from those two people are vastly different. The level of paranoia or the level of distrust is vastly different. You can't blame the camera for that. You can't. So it's because I mean, if you're gonna blame photography, then I'd be having similar interactions in both situations. But I don't, because those two people they come into that situation with vastly different backgrounds, with vastly different experiences, with maybe with photography, but maybe with white men, maybe with having their picture taken, maybe with you know what I mean. It's completely separate. It has nothing to do with the actual camera itself. The camera is just the tool. If I approached them and asked them a question because I was writing an article or working on a thesis or whatever, again, it would be very similar. It wouldn't be that different.
Yes, and I think that certainly one of the main complexities is that we're all fundamentally different in the subject of our experience, etc. My thought is, before your specific interactions with specific individuals, is thinking about the role photography's existence itself has played in the distrust or the idea of a surveillance state. So, for example, similar thing, like if I in a coffee shop and I approach somebody because they're carrying camera, that they look like an artist. Yeah, some of them will talk to me and some of them won't, and it's not right for me to presume it's because I'm Asian or I'm a male or I'm heterosexual. I can't explain what they go through as individuals for sure. But when I look at the entirety of sort of the history of photography and how it parallels all of these vastly sort of ever more complicated and ever more sort of combative political and cultural situations, I just wonder whether they actually play into each other. So certainly when you met somebody who wants their picture taken, I mean, it's not because everybody hates photography. I'm sure, we can verify this, but I'm sure the camera ownership is like the highest it's ever been, of course. It's so accessible. It can be done for relatively cheap. But I think there's something twisted about it in general. Like the idea of the picture, maybe not the process and not the camera itself, not the technology. I just mean like its output, what it used to be intended, how it's interpreted, and now has created this culture. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy to say it out loud, but even politics, it's like I feel like all of this hate politics comes from pictures, like this illustration of who the enemy is. It's not. But
again, the pictures are the tool, David. They're not. People aren't. Images aren't creating divide. You've heard the term divide and conquer. I mean that's. The images are just. It's just another tool. That's it. It's just another tool. It's not causing the divide. It's just the tool. And in the wrong hands, any tool can be dangerous, right? It's just like guns, right? I mean, guns can be great if you're putting food on the table and hunting game, but obviously they can cause incredible loss.
But I think that's exactly my fear, is that you're right. Like when a gun is invented, gunpowder is invented, it's not invented with malice, right? But once it exists, it fundamentally alters everything, absolutely everything. And I think photography has done the same thing. And I worry, like guns, or anything, like shit, man, farming. I don't know, like everything that has technologically come out of human creativity, necessity, or evolution. I don't think photography is exempt from that. I think that there's something that's happened in the last 100 years that I don't know why, just intuitively want to talk about. I think that's what all of this is like, you're right. I think on everything, particularly about me, broad strokes, I definitely have a lot of hang-ups about how things are interpreted, who my audience might be, the fact that work, like you discussed, that I do for myself, I tend not to show anybody. But I also feel like culturally, things have become a lot worse after photography. That this awareness and weaponization of an image, idolatry, celebrity status, the idea that we have even a pop star, comes from photography in my mind, and it's kind of poisonous in my head.
Oh man, you're just you're reaching. You're really reaching to blame these things on photography. That's like, I mean, you could just as easily blame it on any number of other things. I mean, just you could blame all this stuff on capitalism, right? On manipulation of people because of capitalism, because of mass marketing, because of man, oh man, yeah, you've taken one thing and just sort of spiraled out of control with it. It seems, right? And I'm not trying to be harsh here, but I mean, I think you need to get out of your head. It's a tool, man. It's a tool to be enjoyed, and if you're not enjoying it, stop engaging in it. That's it. That's all there is to it, man. Like, worry about your sanity, right? If it's not benefiting you, then just step the fuck back and reevaluate things.
Well, no question. I am not sane, And I think that
I was not implying that. Everyone has their things, right? I'm just saying as far as your assault on photography and blaming it for all the misdeeds in the world, I think is just very extreme. And I mean, I mean, if that's the case, I don't know why you would even own a camera.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, you brought up in passing about capitalism, and, people joke that I'm anti-capital. I mean, I am. But not because I actually have a better system. It's like photography. Why do I have a camera? Look, I distrust what I do with it, for sure. But I don't have a better alternative. I mean, I've started drawing and writing. I do podcasts. We have conversations. If we were allowed to physically touch each other, we'd be doing this at a coffee shop like we did last time. I mean, the interaction and the social value of anything we do, be it meditative, cultural. I mean, I'm not on an assault for existing, but I think the fun part of this conversation is I need a stick to poke people with, and my stick for this particular conversation will be this, unbalanced concept that photography itself has had a fundamentally negative effect on culture, and I'm glad that you're fighting me on it. No, it's good.
I'm not saying that it hasn't been used in a negative way at some point, but to say that it's had a negative impact on culture. But photography has been around for hundreds of years, David. Hundreds of years. So it's
has it?
Yes, absolutely. So I mean, to say that it's I mean, I'm not as learned as you think that I am, but I know that much anyway. And I could grab a book if we want to reference when it actually first started. I think the first image was made in like the 1800s. To say that it's had a negative impact on society, I mean, nothing has brought people together across cultures more. I mean, 100 years ago, you could see pictures from, like someone in Canada could see a picture from Asia, and to be able to see another part of the world that they would never have otherwise seen, to say that overall it's a negative impact when it's done such groundbreaking things as that. I mean, that's crazy, for a child to be able to see, oh, this is my great grandparents who came here and built this house, and I have this image of it. Like, there's far too many positives, and the positives far outweigh the negatives. I think you're looking at it from a very just a very negative victimhood type stance, and it's just I think you need to take a step back, man, and just I'm not sure what value and maybe it's just my inability to embrace the negative, but I'm not sure what value you get out of dissecting things like this and putting such a negative spin on things. Like it seems exhausting.
No, well, I don't know negative, but everything has a cultural impact. I mean, that's the nature of technology, right? I think that this is great. This is a great conversation. I think that we should be opposed and we should pick at it. And I'm taking a necessarily intentionally negative view on this, but I mean, it's part of stirring the pot. Look, Curtis, if we hang out all the time and we just try to appease each other, you and I both know that's not a good way to live either, right? But I also feel like poking at it from this abstract way is going to be a fun way to get photographers out of their own element, just because I want to just get this conversation on record. So, I'm not upset. I'm actually having a lot of fun, and I think it is exhausting.
This is where you live. That's why you live in this spot. I'm gonna have to go and I don't know, put on some Enya and do some meditating here right away. So you know what though? I mean, this is a good segue, because we talked earlier about the picture that's hanging just behind me. I do want to tell you the story behind this image, because it's a perfect example of the positivity of photography. So the I know it's a little bit abstract, but the portrait that's behind me is of a gentleman that lived on the street in Calgary for quite a few years. He had a pretty crazy background. From having done a lot of street photography, I met him and developed a relationship with him, and ended up spending quite a bit of time with him over the years. I'd sit with him for hours, and he would introduce me to all his friends and things like that, and we developed a pretty close relationship. So I'd gotten a bit of a background as to what his backstory was, and essentially he had come from out east Ontario. And he was a somewhat successful restaurateur, and he ended up getting caught up in some shady dealings, and witnessed some things that he should not have witnessed. This is the story that was coming from him. This is what he's telling me. And so he basically moved out west with nothing, left everything behind, basically just kind of faked his disappearance, and began living on the street in Calgary, and was doing so for quite a few years. Obviously, he's telling me this story, and he alcoholism was and I think probably continues to this day to be an issue for him. So I take this story with a grain of salt and everything like that. So I take the image, I do what I do with it, and it was hanging in a gallery, I guess for lack of a better word, for a few months. And I'm at work one day, and I get a phone call, and the voice on the other end, she says, I saw an image that was hanging in this gallery. I was told that this was yours. I was giving your contact information. I was like, yeah. She's like, can you tell me a little bit about this image? And I'm like, well, yeah, absolutely. And so I kind of tell her, I'm like, well, why, why the interest? Hoping that, maybe she'd buy it, I guess, which she didn't. And she goes on to tell me that one of her friends had walked by and seen the image and recognized the eyes of the gentleman, just found something very striking about them, and then somehow made the connection that this gentleman looked just like her. So she went in to see the picture, and when she did, she immediately recognized it as her father, who she hadn't seen since she was a small girl. And she had been given the story from her mother that her father had died. He had disappeared or whatever. He was essentially just gone, and she had no idea that he was even alive. So yeah, obviously she's telling me the story, and I'm just like, I have chills listening to it. So she said to me, I haven't seen him in 20 years. So I ended up actually reconnecting the two of them, and they started to build a relationship. She got him into a halfway house type thing, and was last I heard from them, they're just still working on their relationship together. So that's like a prime example of the good that photography can do. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Perfect. I know you got to go. Thank you. It's a great story, and I think it's a perfect illustration. I have a half of mind of what I'll entitle this post about our little interaction here, Curtis. It's perfect. I need people to, bring hope and interest in it. If I keep talking to only people like me, this thing's not going to last very long. So yeah, it wouldn't be fun if I just talked to people who weren't going to try to put me in my place. Okay, I'll let you go.
I don't know. I don't I fucking know what I'm talking about either, right? Like,
no, we're good. All right. Well, no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So, there you have it. What are your thoughts? Does Curtis seem as stoic to you as he does to me? I understand this is just where Curtis is in his practice at this moment, but there's something compelling about aiming for virtue and this ideal state of practicing an art for itself. It's a compelling idealism, but I don't know if it's real for me. There's such beauty in the aim of a moderated and sage-like life. To be separate and above distractions and to find and enact one's true purpose seems to be a noble goal. But again, for me, I just don't know what my goal is, and I feel that I can never truly know. Instead, it becomes my job to keep acting on either my instinct or intuition, to perhaps gain more experience and wisdom to see if I can turn to such a stoic view. I don't think any individual should be defined specifically to one view or another. Rather, I see the core beliefs expressed in our conversation, and to be honest, they're pretty compelling. In the interest of continuing to be me, I plan to keep blaming photography for all the ills of the world. Not because I'm convinced I'm right, I do want to be wrong, but rather to form let's call it a skeptic's view, that the only way for me to find true wisdom for myself is to keep failing at something with an open enough mind to keep picking up interesting new thoughts and incorporating them into a personal worldview. Perhaps in the end I'll come back to something as beautiful as the classic "For the Love of the Game." I pray for this to be the case. How incredible would it be to approach life stoically? But for the moment, let's keep this conversation going. Let's learn new ways of approaching this weird task, and on to the next artist.